from Greater Sandton and beyond. Get ready for the Sandton Times Hour
with your host,
Alexander.
Coming in hot, ladies and gentlemen, everyone in between and beyond. Welcome to the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8 and also available on all leading digital audio channels. I'm Alexander Leibner, and this is edition 157, week 20 of 2024. And I see we found our announcer again. Is he back? Was he on leave? Who knows? If you'd like to get in touch, you can send through your questions and your comments and your feedback. You can use email editor@sandtontimes.co.za, connect on social media @Sandton Times, and also visit the website www.sandtontimes.co.za. And of course, if you're listening live on Mix 93.8 right at this moment, make sure you hop onto WhatsApp, send us something. I don't know, an emoji, a smile, a GIF. What do people send these days on WhatsApp? Well, the line is 084-822-0938, 084-822-0938, and it's always fun to read those out once we have received them. A special welcome to everyone listening, especially if you're listening for the very first time. Jy is hartelijk willkommen, and also those who listen every single week. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for tuning in again. Across Johannesburg and Pretoria, anywhere in South Africa, and of course everywhere else in the world. And I'm happy to report that things are going strong in Sandtonland. And Vincenzo in the studio once more to make sure that things are sounding ship-shape. Is that the thing? Studio shape, maybe. Not ship-shape. We're not running a ship. Or maybe we are. Back at home after some overseas travels. And a very special show this week as we mark our second radio anniversary for the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8. I feel like we should have like a drum roll.
Hip, hip! Hip, hip! Hip, hip!
I can't believe it's been 2 years on radio. Just over 4 years of the show in total, having started in lockdown as only a podcast, and then moved over on the 9th of May 2022. We kicked things off here on Mix 93.8, and we're still here. And a very special thank you to Abby and the management team at Mix 93.8 for having us occupy this slot on a Monday night. And of course, also to you, listening right now. The Mix 93.8 community, a very special thank you to you for making sure that, you give us the energy, the support that we need to make this happen every single week. We do this for you. A lot of time and effort and a lot of work goes into this show, believe it or not. And I'm so happy to see that 2 years on, we're still going strong and growing. And it's good to be here, and I thoroughly enjoy what I do. If it doesn't come across, I'm so sorry. But you'll notice that this is done with a lot of passion and a lot of enthusiasm. And yeah. So happy radio anniversary, Sandton Times Hour and its community. So coming up in this very special hour, I'll be catching up with the CEO of one of South Africa's alternative exchanges to get a business update and a bit of a temperature on how the economy is doing. So stay tuned for that. Then it's a tech topic that just doesn't seem to be going away, and I'll be chatting to the author of a very hot-selling book on the topic to fill us in on all things artificial intelligence. So listen out for this one. And finally, a young engineer has developed his very own industrial espresso machine here in South Africa, and he hopes to be competing with the world stage of espresso machines, and I'm going to be finding out a little bit more together with you. But first, as we get things going, as we kick things off, it's time for a little bit of music. It's Deep End and Namie with Apologize, and you're switched on to the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8.
Show some love.
subscribe, share,
Leave a review and rating for the Sandton Times Hour
on your favorite podcast app now.
Africa's premium financial event is back. Join us at the Sandton Convention Centre from 20 to 22nd of May and access the latest innovations and insights from across the globe right here in Sandton. Gain insights from industry experts on navigating the markets through immersive learning and education. Don't miss out on this exclusive opportunity to invest in your future. Register today at events.financemagnates.com and claim your free ticket.
The best of talk and music in 1 hour. This is the Sandton Times Hour.
This is the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8 and also available on all good digital audio platforms. And it's good to get another hour going for another week. And as we get this conversation on the road, I'm thrilled to be joined by Kevin Brady. He's the co-founder and CEO of A2X. And if you are not familiar with it or somewhat familiar with it and don't know all the details, well, that's what this conversation is all about. Kevin, it's good to have you on the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you, Alexander. Good to be here.
Well, Kevin, I mean, we've never spoken before, but I think this is a great opportunity to do so as A2X moves into its 7th year, which I can't actually believe it's been 7 years.
No, it's actually probably a bit longer than that because it took us about 2.5, 3 years to get our license. But yes, if we look at the starting blocks, which was opening our doors for business, it's around about 6.5 years. So it's been an incredible journey and a lot of learnings, both good and bad.
Well, let's get into those and so much more that we've got to discuss. But I think to get everybody onto the same page, A2X, from my understanding, is an alternative listing or a secondary listing to what we know as the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So up to a certain point in time, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange was pretty much the only show in town when it came to buying shares or trading shares or raising funds on the open market. And that all changed, I think, when you came along.
Correct. So interestingly enough, if you look at South Africa, we've got this very advanced capital market system. We've got deep saving pools. You know, we're actually an advanced economy when it comes to finance, yet we've only ever had a single provider in terms of a stock market. Now, that's, I guess, not unusual internationally. The difference has been is probably over the last 20 to 30 years, we've seen international markets open up and introduce competition. And for the very benefits that competition bring, you know, efficiencies, client service, innovation. And so we saw this opportunity and we thought, South Africa needs competition. It's good for all involved, both obviously always the end users and also the incumbent. And so we decided to start off on this journey. We looked at the most successful first competitors internationally with a real focus really on Europe and on Australia. We also looked at Canada and the US, but those two in particular. And it's interesting, if you look at the UK, for instance, competition really started in 2007 with the release of regulation called MiFID, which basically set the playing field for how you compete in capital markets. But prior to that, there were some 23 or 24 attempts to enter the market. So it's definitely not an easy thing to do. And ideally, you want regulation on your side. And we felt that South Africa would be supportive of competition, both in terms of stockbroking firms, end clients, and just generally. And I think it's fair to say that we've had wonderful support, and that's really been the underpin of our growth.
Well, you've had a handsome sum of listings that have gone up. I mean, I think the most recent one's been Pepcore. I think there's also Vodacom on there and TFG, or the Foschini Group. These are all shares and companies that people are well familiar with in terms of their first listing on the JSE initially. Why would there be a secondary listing? Why would you have something like that in place?
Maybe go back to your first question. Yeah, we've got 181 securities listed on A2X with a combined market cap of a little over 9 trillion. So yes, we've been very successful in terms of attracting companies to list. Why would they want to do it? So really, this is about selling the same product in a different shop. So in effect, once a company raises capital, those shares sit in, public hands. And this is just saying, when you want to buy more or you want to sell some, why do I have to only go to that one shop? I can now also look at A2X. And what does A2X bring to the party? Effectively, we attract additional liquidity, and we do that through our fee structure. So to transact on A2X, the exchange fees are around about half that of the incumbent. We attract the result of that new liquidity, so there's extra shares, so extra product to buy and sell. And also what we found is that once you start reducing friction costs, you get a better quality market. So not just more liquidity, but you start getting those spreads narrowing. So you might find, for instance, on a market, the best bid price is 10 Rand, the best offer price is 10 Rand and 10 cents. But by taking some of the costs out of the system, people then go 10.01 bid, 10.09 offered. And, 1 cent on 10 Rand is 10 basis points, which is more than most people pay in brokerage, at least on the institutional side. So it gives their investors choice. It allows them to buy and sell the shares on an alternative venue, often getting better price at a lower cost.
And I suppose you've also got the benefit of I suppose, listing or coming online at a later stage in life than most exchanges. I mean, I remember visiting the exchange in Kigali, Rwanda, which consisted of a whiteboard and a marker, and a guy who would spend an hour or two a day adding and subtracting shares on a whiteboard. And I suppose very much the same story in South Africa, where, you know, over the last however many decades, you know, it's gone from people ringing bells and screaming on trading floors at whiteboards and chalkboards to digital, to where we are now with the internet. You've skipped all of that and you've gone straight to whatever the latest technology is.
So, look, I'm going to show my age now, but I was one of those traders on the JSE floor when it was chalkboards and you marked up the price and you shouted at each other. And it was an incredible grounding and education for me. But you're right, it's all digital now. And that benefit that we have is exactly as you indicate. You get to use the latest technology, which has come down in price. It's more resilient, it's faster, it offers you more flexibility. And so you get to kind of leapfrog. And you don't have these legacy systems that you have to worry about. And that has been a very core advantage of us, to bring the latest technology to this market at a much lower cost. And that's one of the ways we can pass on efficiency savings and as a result, charge lower fees.
Well, I'm in conversation with co-founder and CEO of A2X, one of the platforms that you can use to buy and sell shares. He's Kevin Brady. We're in conversation chatting about the exchange, which is now well into its 7th year. And also, we're going to be talking about the economy shortly. We're going to take a quick break and more of this conversation right after this.
Online, on air,
Anywhere, anytime.
this is the Sandton Times Hour. Follow the Sandton Times on social media.
At Sandton Times.
This is the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8, and we're in conversation with Kevin Brady. He's the co-founder and CEO of A2X, and we've been chatting about the history of the exchange, the history of exchanges around the world and in South Africa, and talking about some of the fantastic portfolio that they've built up in terms of companies listed on A2X. But having said that as well, Kevin, we've come out of an interesting time where we've seen the historical, the traditional exchange seeing a lot of companies delisting, and also the economy taking a lot of strain and companies taking a lot of strain. Is this an indication that doing business through exchanges is sort of come to an end, or is becoming less popular? Or is it just a sign that the economy is just going through a really difficult period and people and companies are having to make decisions as to how they're going to operate?
Yeah, I mean, very good question. And I suspect that there are probably a number of factors that influence that. Macro factors are probably a very important starting point. As you say, it hasn't probably been the best 6 years to choose, with COVID making up 2 of them. On top of that, South African regulation is somewhat out of date. So although it allows for competitor exchanges, it doesn't create a level playing field yet. And I'm encouraged to say we saw some draft regulation just this week that should hopefully get rolled out sooner rather than later. That should help. So yes, I think the challenges you have is that, first of all, you've got macro factors. You do need growing economies. And South Africa, I think both for political and macro reasons, has increasingly seen disinvestment from an international stage. And so there's stuff we need to, as a country, get right around that. But there's also, I think, exchange-specific stuff that could play a role. I think South Africa, again, being a single provider or a monopoly, you know, sometimes you swing too far to over-regulating. And our sense is that, you know, when you start over-regulating and making it so difficult that you start inhibiting growth. And I think if you look at a lot of the delistings, much of it's got to do with price and over-regulation and maybe a lack of investor support. And South Africa needs to find ways to swing that pendulum back to make it more attractive. It also needs to be more attractive and compete against global flows by being more efficient, offering lower fees. While it may not seem like a lot of money, paying 10 basis points on an international platform where you're competing, that's a big number. And exchanges charge a fraction of that. So, you know, it's the rise of things like private equity come up the curve. So I think there's a lot of factors. We need to get them all right. We need to get the economy right. We need to get exchange regulation more attractive. We need to be more innovative in order types and attracting that international flow. So, we see ourselves playing a role in that, and we can demonstrate how we've attracted new flows and new liquidity to South Africa just by being a more efficient platform.
Well, we were chatting to a CEO in the property space not too long ago who was saying, that he's chatting to international investors in the Middle East, etc., and they're saying, well, once we convert our dirhams or our pounds or our dollars into rands, by the time we've made this investment, we're not going to be making much money back because it's just too small for us. We actually want much bigger investments. And I'm also kind of almost thinking, in the same way, are international investors finding the rand almost too weak to make those significant investments into our companies to get the return that they actually need?
So I think there are different investors that look for different growth profiles and different size. So I don't think it's a function of, there are potential investors out there. They are looking for stability and comfort and regulation around if they do invest, is my money safe? Are they going to change anything? What's the risk return based on if I put it somewhere else? And I think that's where South Africa's fallen short in attracting it. And I think the currency is weak because of those very reasons. We're not attracting that inflow of money. And in fact, if you follow some of the news, the Reg 28, which allows pension funds, insurance companies to move money offshore, the limits were actually increased from 30% to 45%. So not only we're not getting the investment, the money we do have is going offshore. So these are big factor things we need to get right. And it starts with a free market, a growing economy, right, where you support the private sector. And I think if you look, short term, we've got risks with elections, but hopefully the outcome of the election is a little bit more centrist and we get some more free market and business supporting regulation that helps drive employment and business growth, etc. And that's really what we need as a country. Otherwise, longer term, it's not a great place for anyone.
Well, I was actually going to ask you that, and I'm glad you touched on it, because there's no conversation that happens at this time of the year without touching on the elections. And I was going to say to you, is it a hurry up and wait case? And once we know where we're at, people will start bringing their money back into the economy and have a clearer picture as to where we're going. And I think you've managed to touch on that and at least give us a bit of an indicator as well. For you, the year ahead, any major plans or any major developments for A2X as you move into the 7th year?
So going back to elections, I think you're right. It'll be a wait and see attitude until we see what the outcome is. Let's hope the outcome is positive for the economy. In terms of our focus, we've got a couple of key areas. So in terms of listings, we've got 30 of the top 40, or that 181 securities. There's many more out there that we can get. There's definitely 10 in the top 40 we would still like to get, and we're working on that. So new products. The second area we look at is inward listings, so kind of like unique products. So South Africa has been a shrinking pot. We inward listed our first company from the London Stock Exchange about a month ago. We've got another one in the pipeline. So we're looking at ways of bringing new product to South Africa. And then probably the last area we're looking at is not all the brokers as yet are connected and trading on A2X. So we're spending quite a lot of time getting them on and fully operationalized, as we refer to it. And then we've got that last section where we focus on things like innovation, order types that help unlock liquidity, that keep us abreast of what's happening internationally. So lots of things to push forward. And we're very excited about where we are. And if we can get some tailwinds from a good economy, it'll be an exciting place to be.
Well, Kevin Brady, he's a co-founder and CEO of A2X. It's been great having a chat to you. Our first conversation, certainly not our last one, talking about the economy, talking about where the exchange is at, and of course also understanding where South Africa is going. And I'm sure we'll chat once the elections are over and see how the economy evens out, and also some of those listings coming up. It's the bottom of the hour. We're going to take a quick musical break and more of the Sandton Times Hour right after this.
For more,
The Sandton Times Hour continues.
Welcome to the second half of the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8. I'm Alexander Leipner, and that was Children, that famous Robert Miles tune. But that was the Ku Jun remix, which I think is not a bad take on an all-time classic, and probably one of those tunes you remember from the 90s. If you caught something intriguing and interesting during the show, but didn't get a chance to write it all down or jot it down or miss some information, don't despair. All the information will be up on the website under show notes for this particular edition. So you can hop on to www.sandtontimes.co.za and explore the comprehensive show notes, breakdown of all the things we discussed, some further reading, and also some links. And also don't forget that you can connect with the Sandton Times on social media at Sandton Times on whatever your preferred platform is. Find a platform you're comfortable with. Make sure you connect there, and also feel free to engage, get in touch, all those good things. I'm thrilled to be joined by a gentleman I get to bump into quite regularly, and he is a great source of knowledge when it comes to technology, when it comes to all things tech. His name's Arthur Goldstuck, and he's synonymous with all things tech. He's written a book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to AI. And Arthur, it's good to have you on the Sandton Times Hour.
Thanks, Alex. Great to be here.
Arthur, what inspired this book on AI? I mean, I know it's a very hot topic, and a lot of people talk about it in all kinds of settings, but to sit down and write an entire book on it, I mean, that's a whole nother story.
Well, the funny thing is that I've been writing the book for the past 8 years.
Oh, wow.
Without realizing I was writing a book. But being fascinated by technology and cutting-edge technology, and always looking for science fiction becoming reality, AI has been at the forefront of my interests for years, and I've been fascinated by it for many years. So I began writing about it about 8 years ago in terms of covering conferences that were dealing with AI, and then finding examples of AI in practice was always, for me, first prize. So by the time generative AI hit, with ChatGPT and then Google Bard, which became Google Gemini, and Microsoft Copilot, by the time all of those hit, I had been taking deep dives into AI for all these years. And suddenly the rest of the world was as fascinated as I had been all this time. But what's also happened, because I've been writing about it so much, I was being asked frequently to do interviews on radio and TV about AI, about what it means, what ChatGPT is going to do to education, and so on. And during one of these interviews, my younger daughter, Zianda, was listening to me speaking, sitting here in the office, and said, "Why don't you write a book about it?" And 3 minutes later, I'd emailed my publisher, and a week later, we were sitting in Pan Macmillan's offices in Johannesburg discussing the structure of this new book. But you could almost say it wrote itself. Although there was a lot of additional writing to do and adapting the columns I'd written over the years, it flowed so easily that it was probably the least stressful book I've ever written.
Well, when you say it almost wrote itself, you almost think like, did ChatGPT write it? But I know you probably wrote it from your own hands. But Arthur, I
was hoping you would pick up that nuance.
I did indeed, Arthur. We're very sharp here on this show. But I was going to say to you, it must be quite tough writing a book that is on a topic that is evolving at such a pace that by the time the book comes out, you're almost worried that have you missed the train? Is there new content you need to add onto it?
Well, that was a big challenge. So I tried to limit the extent to which I was writing about specific tools that you should use right now, except where I knew those tools were already well established and they had been in use for years. But the primary way that I got around that issue was by recounting my adventures in using AI or coming across AI, and recounting the way the various stages of AI emerged into the public eye at the various conferences I attended over the years. So I go into a lot of detail, for example, about the Amazon Web Services conference in 2017, where they unveiled 22 new AI products that any business could use off their cloud platform. And that was probably as significant, probably far more significant than the launch of ChatGPT within the business world. But because they were business tools and you had to pay to use them, they certainly were not mainstream. Some of them quickly became commonly used tools by banks, for example. So there's a tool called SageMaker, which is a machine learning tool that creates applications and algorithms almost on the fly. And very quickly, we had South African banks using that tool. So they were being used in business, and business was exploring AI all these years. But with generative AI, suddenly it became freely available to the public. And the power of it, in terms of what an ordinary person could do, was unprecedented. And that's what the big shift was all about. But by recounting how it evolved to that stage, how the world responded, how these tools are being used, and what we can expect next, I got around the issue mostly of writing about what is happening right now. In other words, these are the leading edge tools. I didn't have to say that. I spoke more about the principles of how AI will change, for example, health, education, manufacture, transportation in the coming years. And you would know, having attended quite a few car launches, that the autonomous features built into cars now have been around for years. If you were at the very cutting edge in 2016, in terms of the cars you were driving, you would have had the same technology then that is now becoming mainstream as what they call safety features in cars. But the technology hasn't yet shifted. And the level of autonomy that was available then is not very different to the level of autonomy available now. What's really happening is that the evolution of the self-driving car has stalled for regulatory reasons and other. But it doesn't mean you can't write about what the self-driving car will look like or operate like in the future. So a lot of what I talk about is what one can extrapolate into the future quite easily from what's happening today. I don't try to predict the exact impact. What I do, of course, do in the book is try to look into the crystal ball from a vision point of view, not a prediction point of view, but a vision for what the future could look like and the kind of benefits AI will bring us in the future based on what we know today.
Do you find that there are certain industries that have really moved ahead quite swiftly in adopting AI and others that have just absolutely been left behind and are still trying to figure out what's going on?
Very much so. And also within specific industries, you have pockets of excellence where they are at the far end of the cutting edge of AI, whereas other elements of those industries are still resisting and arguing why they should never use AI. But an industry that, or sector that has really embraced it has been manufacturing. And it goes from the software that they're using all the way through to the equipment that they use for manufacture. And one of my favorite case studies in the book is in fact another car company, and that is Ford and their factory near Pretoria in Silverton. And that's a factory that in 2009 had one production line employing 1,500 people. They then brought in automation to a level that had not been seen in this country before, which scared the workers, thinking they were all going to lose their jobs. They used machine learning, AI, and automation to streamline production, but also to improve the quality of the vehicles. But they still needed human oversight and humans to do a lot of the manual work and some of the work that required a dexterity that machines couldn't achieve. And what happened next was incredible because it became one of the centers of excellence of Ford manufacture worldwide, to the extent that the demand for vehicles produced in South Africa almost, I'm not sure of the proportion, but it was almost an exponential increase in demand. And the result of that was that they had to open up another 2 production lines. And when I say a production line, I'm not just talking about one conveyor belt. I'm talking about entire factories. And by 2019, those 3 production lines were employing 4,500 people compared to the 1,500 people at the start of the process. So it's a great example of how automation creates jobs rather than takes away jobs. But it's also an excellent example of how the manufacturing industry has, in fact, always been ahead of that particular curve. In medicine, you also see it, where a lot of forward-thinking hospitals globally are using robots and AI to assist with surgery and the likes, but also to assist with medical record keeping, moving medical records from paper-based to a electronic format, which makes it far easier to access, of course, and makes it possible then to analyze trends in the data contained in those medical reports. Whereas when it's all paper-based, it's impossible to, at the press of a button, analyze the trends that are shaping healthcare, for example. And you'll see an intensification of the use of AI in healthcare over the years, and it's going to transform the entire field.
Well, it's interesting that it's always a default position when it comes to this new technologies that the first thing people go is, I'm going to lose my job, it's the end of the world, and so on. But I think it also comes from a lack of knowledge and from a lack of understanding, or maybe even a lack of, like you said, vision of what the technology could offer and how it could fit into or even improve a life as it is at the moment. So would you say that this book pretty much speaks to a broad spectrum of readers, so people who are vaguely familiar or interested in AI, and also people who have sort of already started delving into it a little bit more deep and just want to get a better understanding?
Very much so. And for that very reason, I created a code of what each chapter or who each chapter would appeal to, and each section in each chapter. And in the beginning of the book, I have a page that says how to read this book. Of course, people don't need to be told how to read, but what I gave them was a guide to the symbols and what those symbols represented for each section. So a light bulb meant general interest, general consumer interest, or anybody would find that of interest. And a chart meant that it was of business interest, and a gear meant that it was of technical interest. So people who are scared off by technical descriptions could avoid any section that had that gear, for example. And then there was a consumer section as well, and a professional section. So the certificate symbol was for professionals in specific industries, like lawyers, doctors, and the like.
How's the book performed? Have you had some good feedback? Is it doing well?
It's been amazing. It's gone into its third printing.
Sure.
And of course, I'm delighted. The publisher is delighted. But Pan Macmillan have done a magnificent job of both the publishing of the book. The cover that they produced was, for me, quite beautiful. And the support of the book from their publicists through to their sales department has been phenomenal. So as the book was selling out its first run, they were printing the second run, and then the third run. So it's continued selling strongly, and Pan Macmillan continue reprinting it.
Well, I hope you catch one of those reprints when you go to the bookstore or when you go online and buy books, because that's also a big thing. The Hitchhiker's Guide to AI by Arthur Goldstuck. I've just been in conversation with him. If this has sparked your interest, whet your appetite, or you've been into AI for a bit and want to know a little bit more, well, I encourage you to grab a copy and have a read, and also share your feedback. And Arthur, it's been fantastic having you on the Sandton Times Hour. We're going to take a quick musical break and more of the Sandton Times Hour right after this.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
This is the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8 and available on all good digital platforms. And that was Kaos, or Ghost. I don't even know how you pronounce some of these artists anymore. Anyway, Kaos with Can't Go Back. And we can't go back anymore because we're almost at the end of the show. But before we close things out, I came across a really fascinating South African sort of engineering entrepreneurial story. It's called Henlo Coffee. And it's South Africa's premium espresso machines. Now, it's not something that most of us deal with on a daily basis unless you've got sort of a bean-to-cup coffee machine at home. If you've really invested, I mean, a lot of people like the instant coffee. It's much easier. And then if you're in the restaurant space or the hospitality space, well, then, then you pull out the heavy guns and you have those incredible machines that do all kinds of things. They froth the milk, they steam. You're very accurate in terms of how you grind the beans. And, it's the kind of stuff that we go to when you go to the shops and you buy yourself coffee on the way to work or away from work. And that's the kind of machines we're talking about right now. And the gentleman who's behind this particular machine is Henlo van der Westhuizen. He's the managing director of Henlo & Co. And Henlo, it's good to have you on the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you so much, Alexander. It's fantastic to be here.
Well, listen, it's a fascinating conversation to have. You've got into a space that has been dominated, I think, by a lot of international brands. I'm thinking of the Italians specifically, but I'm sure there's also something coming out of Asia, something coming out of the US as well. But what inspired you to create Henlo Coffee, and what sets this machine apart from any other machine in the market?
So, Alex, it really started out in, I would say, in the Stellenbosch area where I kind of fell in love with the coffee culture. Being a young engineering student there, constantly look around and start to realize how things work, and then you get more interested in them. And obviously, coffee machines and being in those spaces, you see these beautiful pieces of art, and they've got this rich history behind them of all this innovation pushing them through the 60s and the 70s and the 80s to get them to a platform where they are now. And as I slowly started taking a look at this, I saw that the industry was kind of stagnating into a weird space. And learning a bit more about it from the baristas themselves and some of these major suppliers and importers, you realize that the biggest stifle at the moment is this change in what is the coffee experience all about. Is it about you when you sit down, the taste you have, the experience you have in the cafe, and what really relates to that? And I found that to be quite barista-centric. I don't think it's just a South African thing, but we really love the people and friendly people, and you just want to engage. And that's half the reason you have your favorite cafe is because of the guy standing behind the counter. So what we try to create is something that's a bit revolutionary in a sense that it does not focus on being the best value add for necessarily the guy buying the machine itself. But that should be a byproduct by constantly upskilling the barista actually using the machine. So our machines have a couple of technological features that were very carefully crafted to enable the barista to continuously learn as they use this machine about what do they do wrong, what do they do right. So we can reward them when they do things right, but then also create something that it's an essence of your cafe in creating the experience in the person. And when you drop another machine in there, the person should still retain the skills that they have learned. And by changing this ethos, we found ourselves moving into space and seeing the bigger picture of how the specialty coffee industry is struggling to get into the African market, for instance, or the Asian market. And the reason being is when these machines are designed, they're designed with all the European and the American type of problems in place, where your labor is something that's looked down upon and you're trying to minimize that in your cafe in order to save costs. Where in the African culture, it's all about embracing that. You know, we really want to do job creation with this. We don't want to take that away with automation and such, especially coffee being so, very personal for a lot of people.
Well, listen, from the pictures I've seen and sort of, the look of the machine, it seems to sort of tick the boxes in terms of what a lot of the academics like to call the hygiene factors, sort of the basics of what a machine needs to do and has been doing for however many decades. But you've brought in a lot of tech into that space. And is that sort of what you're talking about when you say, it's a machine that you can drop off with somebody and it's almost like, I wouldn't like to say it runs on autopilot, but it does a lot more things than a normal sort of almost manual espresso machine would do.
Yeah, so Alexander, the idea we had starting up in a company is you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Unfortunately, we knew we don't know what we don't know. So what we ended up doing in the rapid prototyping environment that we found ourselves is there's a lot of little pieces of tech that people all around the world are really pushing to move into industry. Something stupid like our Raspberry Pi or our touchscreens coming from Australia. It's all of these innovative companies that lower the barrier of getting something. It's not necessarily as finished product as you would get through other means of prototyping yourself and creating things in-house. But what that allowed us to do is we could very easily say, okay, let's take a manual coffee machine. We know what it does. Any technician can work on that. So what we want to do is we want to create a software layer between that and the client. So we can, after the fact, try and realize, look, how can we do things better? How can this machine do better? What can we do differently? That also allowed us to do things like remote diagnostics, which is very, very helpful if you're a young company dropping machines all over South Africa. So now we can remotely log into these machines when there are issues, debug them directly through our online chat support. And it's something that just leverages what is already existing in the market today. A lot of the tech we're leveraging didn't exist or weren't industry ready 4, 5, 6 years ago. So we found ourselves in this very agile space where we were able to create things based off of little pieces of art that people all around the world is constantly striving and pushing and innovating. But I think what makes us very unique is then the application thereof, or the value we see in what we are doing, and how we can upskill South Africa and help other entrepreneurs who wants to penetrate the specialty industry as much as we can.
Well, I certainly hope you continue to percolate on this. I think it's a really interesting opportunity and really interesting technology that you've developed, and we're going to put up some details up on the website. So if you're trying to imagine what this machine looks like and what it does, we can check out the sandtontimes.co.za. We'll put some info up there, maybe some pictures as well, and you can check it out. Henlo van der Westhuizen, he's the managing director of Henlo & Co., a Henlo coffee machine, which has positioned itself as South Africa's premium espresso machine, which combines sort of all the things that you expect from an espresso machine, but then combined with technology on an industrial scale. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Sandton Times Hour, and thanks for the chat.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure, Alex. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to maybe having many more chats.
Over coffee.
Over coffee.
Okay, great. I think that's all we have time for this week as I look at the clock, and the Sandton Times Hour comes to a close right now on Mix 93.8, but stay tuned and keep listening as programming continues on the airwaves. And if you're listening to this on one of the podcast platforms, well, make sure you subscribe and you keep getting this every single week onto your mobile device, and you can continue listening there. If you want to get in touch, you can email editor@sandtontimes.co.za, social media @Sandton Times, and of course the website www.sandtontimes.co.za. And feel free to send through your questions, your comments, your feedback, your emails, and we work through those emails. And trust me, we read every single email and we get them, and sometimes it's possible to do something, sometimes it's not. It all depends on how crazy it is at that point in time, but obviously we do take cognizance of these things. And a very special thank you to all the guests who were on the show this week. Special edition, second radio anniversary of the Sandton Times Hour. So, fantastic. I think you and Vincenzo and I are going to go for, like an Aperol Spritz now or something. I think we need to have a toast, or at least, did someone bring a cake? Did someone bring us an anniversary cake? I must actually have a look there in the lobby, if there's something outside the studio. That would have been nice, right? Maybe just even a chicken wing would have been quite cool. But anyway, we'll have a little toast to the second radio anniversary. And of course, thank you to the Sandton Times team as well as everyone at Mix 93.8. And let's wrap up this show this week, and that's to play out with Corona and Rhythm of the Night. Thank you for listening, and let's do it again next week.